Yeah, you hear. It's how I do it with Julian when we work in Zoom and we have to do something. We just leave the microphone on and call each other. I'm back.
Okay. I was trying to check. We started going through last week the commentary. I
Yes.
can't remember if we finished the commentary of the Darshana Vidya Sutra and the Darshana um, Moksha Dharma, sorry, Moksha Dharma Vidya Sutra and the Moksha Dharma Sutra. Anything first you'd like to share or asked before, but that's what I was trying to find out and I hadn't yet seen where we got to.
No, I don't have anything to share at the moment or questions. And we read the commentary. We finished the page 17
Okay, great. Great.
because
So
I made notes. That's how I know.
um if you like we can have you managed to continue with the practice we were doing, the Kundalini Pranayama practice?
More or less, but not daily.
Okay.
Yeah, whenever I remember, I do a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, but not the full, like, yeah.
Because if it feels too kind of dense to spend the whole class on the commentary, we can do the Kundalini Pranayama and do the commentary as well.
Yeah,
Does
up
that
to
feel?
you, but what to cover.
I'm okay to just work through the commentary, but if it feels like it's kind of tiring to just do that for the whole hour, we can mix it up with a practice.
Well, let's see. It's also interesting to go to the sutras.
Yeah. Okay.
That gives me actually a lot of answers. So, yeah.
Great. Okay. 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 Good. Then I'll open it up here.
Maybe I have a question
Yeah.
that comes with the, like, I know practices shouldn't go anywhere, blah, blah, blah. But what does it feel like when the Amrita opens and passes down?
Yeah.
How do I recognize it?
I don't necessarily feel physical sensations, but sometimes it's not necessarily the same, exactly the same thing, right? But I sometimes when I'm having a shift in the state of consciousness that has an effect physiologically, I actually get you know the synovial fluid between the joints, and you can kind of click the knuckles and the spine and all this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes it seems it's as if I don't know exactly what's happening, but it's as if the skull itself is kind of cracking to kind of adjust for something that's going on in within the brain and the glands, So there are two things that I feel at a very physiological level sometimes, and one is these kind of sounds like a crack within the skull, and another thing sometimes is a um, it's like, and it sounds silly, but it's like I'm hearing a gland secreting. It's like a kind of a
I like,
sound, like a little kind of squelchy sound
okay.
within the cranium as well. Usually, it's not that I'm feeling necessarily extremely blissful, but this happens when there's a sense of shift in rhythm. So imagine that I've been involved in activities, and then in the transition to a rhythm of stillness, of beingness rather than activity. Sometimes, as a part of the physiological change, these sensations, these phenomena arise. Um, there are things that go all the way back to the indications that my first Kriya Yoga teacher gave, of raising the eyebrows and expressing the sense of receiving a pleasant surprise. And it's like the posture of experiencing grace, experiencing the receiving of blessings. And this happens spontaneously for me. Um, when I meditate, sometimes when giving class, when I close my eyes. Um, and so I don't I don't have specific sensations that I would say, well, that's definitely Amrita being produced. So what I've described to you is my experience, um, the sense of blessedness, the sense of fullness, the sense of divine grace as you could say a quality of beingness, a quality of presence. I feel that, but I don't feel like a specific um, in some of the texts it describes it as if you'll experience like a honey kind of like a substance itself. And I haven't really experienced it in that way. I experienced the quality of presence, the quality of beingness associated with it, but not a substance, in my mouth, in my throat. What were you saying? Sorry.
No, the dogs were talking, not me. I was like,
Ah,
it's like, because it's a helicopter and they freak out.
okay. No, I didn't. It's not that I heard you. It's that I saw you were
Okay.
concerned with something, and I wasn't sure if you
I
wanted
was
to say.
already saying I'm sorry.
No, there was no sound coming through. Your Zoom is filtering out the noise.
Cool. I'm
Yeah,
probably I switched it on without and then forgot.
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Um, how about you? What
I
would you?
had
Yeah,
I had now maybe I now I have a question.
yeah,
I had a session with a client and he report we he doesn't practice anything, so I'm like a normal person. And he when I was moving the energy up, all of a sudden he sat up and I was like, oh, I'm so hot in the head. And have you ever experienced it? For me, it was very new because normally they have issues with the heart and
yeah,
not the
yeah.
head. Yeah.
I have experienced not so much in my own body, but I have experienced for other people that the sense of energetic intensity can be in the head, and sometimes for that reason. And it's good that you brought this up actually, because one of the things that it's good for us to be able to help people cope with, and I'm sure you've got a lot of experience with this, but for other people that don't work with energy the way you do, with the body the way you do, it's really good to know that for people when they're awakening energy, it can reach a point of feeling like it's pressure, like they're under pressure, whether it's the heart or the head. And Tai Chi type movements, Qigong type practices where we're inducing energy to flow not only through visualization and breath, but also assisting with movements of the hands, because our attention follows that. And, we have energy flow through the hand. So by accompanying the intention with hand movements, and also at the head, to kind of invite the energy to continue its flow, so we can kind of see ourselves and experience ourselves and invite the energy to function as a kind of fountain here that then showers us and bathes and comes up again. And so these kind of movements that you find in Qigong practices, where the energy is being invited to the you could say the energy of heaven and earth being brought together, and the human body is this bridge in between where the energy is able to flow freely. So that's something that can help when there is this sense of, especially as you described, someone who's not familiar with practices and suddenly they're experiencing a certain amount of intensity. So just the movements themselves, even if they're not really familiar with energy and managing energy, but the movements may feel natural enough for them to kind of engage with this and for it to help them to feel a sense of release and expansiveness. Because precisely the kind of person that isn't familiar with energy in their, you could say, in their subconscious, the way they see themselves is as physical, as a physical body, you know, a mind in a body kind of thing. And so even if they're feeling energy, the subconscious idea, you could say, will be that this it's energy in a body, and that the physical body inevitably is somehow the container for this energy. And that difficult combination of energy awakening and a conviction in their sense of identity that they're a physical form, that combination will create pressure. They need to soften their sense of self
Mm.
to create the conditions for energy to flow.
He
And
wasn't very soft.
say again?
He wasn't very soft. He was very like set up.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was so surprised because all of a sudden he set up and I didn't even have a chance to help him moving the energy in order to sense that something is stuck.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, he was, I'm hot in it. He controlled the whole situation, basically, also. No?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the pressure can easily be experienced as heat, you know, the kind of the friction, let's say, of the pressure. So that's quite common for it to be experienced as heat.
Yeah.
Um,
But the heat comes from the pressure or because it's an amount of energy?
Both, because if the energy is flowing very freely, if there's nothing holding it back from expansion and flow, it doesn't need to be hot. It's the difficulty in moving, in having space for the flow. It's whatever constrictions there may be around the free flow of energy that creates the heat. This is why I say that a well managed, a well prepared for Kundalini awakening can have no sensations, no drama, no sensations, no heat, no light, no nothing. Just
I know.
integrate into your
It's like,
experience.
yeah,
It's not so exciting, but
almost a bit disappointing. I was expecting ecstasy.
yeah,
Yeah,
and I partly I say this also because it brings up this contrast not only with what is typical, but with what we kind of expect and what we kind of long for. Like we want this big drama, this big bang, right? This big wow. And the idea that it could just be life itself, just life itself, flowing gently, beautifully,
yeah,
gracefully, in a sense of fullness, feels like, oh, just that. But, you know, that the fact that we're hoping for something big is also showing that there is you could say the sense of identity, the sense of what we think the normal is, the reality, the baseline feels incomplete. And that's also useful to notice, right? That if we were in a if our baseline normal state was a sense of fullness, then from a sense of fullness, why all the friction and light and all the intensity? It's like you're in fullness, and the fullness
yeah.
is graceful and divine. You know, it has that quality embedded in it.
But there are two things to say to it. Like one is probably because the expectation is there because in the neo-tantric movement they focus so much on sexual energy and
Yeah,
pleasure. And it's
yeah,
all mixed up.
yeah.
And then also, what was I going to say? Complaining about neo-tantra. I forgot the other one. Um, yeah. that when the energy is not managed, not controlled in the body, I read this once, you can correct if it's right, then it can be more explosive because, it's not channeled. And Ida and Pingala, they are not calm and balanced, and the energy wakes up and just goes somewhere. That's what I read, at least.
Yeah, it's like
I had it like this.
it's
Yeah.
similar to the idea of if we think of the whole idea of karma as associated with conditioning, right? And the subconscious, there is an aspect of the subconscious that is just, you could say, filtering out what's not super relevant to this moment. Because we've got so much that we're processing. But we filter what's relevant for now. What do we give attention to now? The rest, you could say it's in the subconscious. The rest of all the sensations that are arising. But there is another aspect of the the subconscious, which is what we can't handle, right? Because it's too intense. Like, so trauma, for example, there's a certain amount of filtering of what comes into the present moment. We're trying to kind of put down what we don't want to feel, what we don't want to give attention to, because it feels like it would be overwhelming. And so what can happen in some conditions is that all the repressed energy, right? The repressed emotion, the repressed memory, all of that repressed life force is flowing. Now that can be kind of like a Kundalini awakening, but it's not a balanced flow because rather than it coming about through the relaxed balance in which there is, you could say, a divine revelation of beauty and grace and wholeness. Instead, there is this overwhelming sense of like, I don't know what's happening and it's too much. And you want to be in control in that moment, right? That's because it feels like losing control. And so in terms of energetic activation, these things are very similar. We tend to think of Kundalini as like a completely different thing. But it's the life force, right? And you could say that when the life force is flowing in a certain way, we call it Kundalini. It's not that Kundalini is a different energy, it's the same energy flowing in a certain way and having certain effects for that reason. I took some notes just the other day, which are relevant to this as well. You mentioned Neo Tantra and in this context, and I remembered one thing that comes up in Neo Tantra, I think, is the idea that Kundalini and sexual energy are the same thing. And so for that reason, I think then that's connected with what you were saying as well, right? If you think sexual energy and Kundalini are exactly the same thing, like zero difference, then that would imply that, well, a Kundalini awakening is going to be
Sexual.
it's going to be, yeah, it's going to be experienced as sexual energy. It's going to be experienced in a kind of erotic way, in an orgasmic way, right? This awakening. And if so, the idea that it could happen kind of imperceptibly, just as part of the flow and the grace of life, seems strange if we've put it in the category of sexual energy, because we've got very specific associations that we attribute to sexual energy. So when we think of it purely as life force, without attributing any particular characteristic to it, as the pure potentiality, the pure potentiality of Shakti, of creative energy. So it can become anything. And you can think of, in fact, this may be helpful if you think of the fact that Ida and Pingala are reflecting, or how can I put it? they're expressions of the way we're relating to the world. The way energy is configured, either, let's say, to the left or to the right, in the masculine, the feminine, the expansive, the contractive, these dynamics are how we're interacting at every moment with the world. They're expressions of how we feel, which deeper down is reflecting what we believe about ourselves, about reality, and about our relationship to the world, our identity, even, because that defines our relationship with the world. So Ida and Pingala are mirroring a profound sense of who we feel we are and our place in the world and what has to be done. So they're responding to those core dynamics of or that core belief structure, right? The sense of wholeness is associated with not needing to fix anything, right? And the sense of, therefore, beingness, presence. And these responsive energies, these, you could say, energies that are coping with the challenges of life, they're not required. They're not required because life is no longer a threat, a problem to be fixed. So those channels are not required to be, energy doesn't need to be pumped into them, let's say. Another way to put it is that we're not in that moment needing to be either advancing or retreating. We're not trying to achieve anything or run away from anything. So the you could say this mystery of balancing Ida and Pingala and having energy flow through the central channel, it can become a little bit esoteric and it's like, okay, well, we get it because we've heard it, but what does it really mean? And I think we can put it in terms that are meaningful to our experience in this way. We're either in a mode of functioning where we're trying to cope with life, or in a state of trusting presence and contentment. And that is the state in which Sushumna Nadi is available, let's say, and the energy can be in its expressing as grace. And how does all this relate to what I was saying, right? Trauma and sexual energy. So the fact that we keep so much under pressure day to day because we have been taught to hold back the intensity of our emotion, our anger, even our fear, even our joy, even our pleasure, right? These are things that in formal society we kind of contain. We're giving them a permissible shape, you could say. So there is a containment of the spontaneous flow of energy. In certain conditions, we are not able to contain anymore. And there is an explosive quality to the expression of the energy. So this can happen in anger, it can happen in sexual arousal, it can happen in fear. There are all sorts of conditions in which the energy just can't be contained. It's we're incapable in that moment of just being formal and contained. So there are many different states in which we can have something like a kind of Kundalini burst, you could say. Mm. And you could say that what Tantra can help us do is to combine the intensity of all the range of energy. So it's not just the sexual energy, but also the energy of anger, potentially, the energy of grief, any of these strong expressions of intense energetic activation through awareness, through breath, through a sense of, let's say, trust in the divine intelligence, the organic intelligence. We enter into a space in which we can bring the intensity in without feeling like I've got to control it. It's the wrong thing. It's not appropriate. No, there is space for it. the fact that we're creating space for it, like I was saying before about the heat, the friction, when we create space for it, it can become expansion of consciousness. It can become, it can turn into bliss through its expansive nature. But usually we're trying to give it a very specific expression or no expression, right? It's under that kind of pressure to conform to the formality that we have assumed it needs to have. And so where this fits into sexual energy is partly that we have an opportunity with all our life force. We have an opportunity to give it, let's say, healthy expression and full expression. And so Tantra gives us this synergy of how to work with an instinctive force, a force that is, it's there, wanting to come into expression. And generally, society kind of says, well, in certain conditions, that's okay. With your partner, with someone that you love and trust, or depending on what kind of social conditioning we attribute to how we're supposed to experience our sexuality. But basically, it's conditional, right? How we experience it through societal norms. And so Tantra is giving us the possibility of, instead of being an unconscious, in fact, even unconscious fear of that intensity, at the same time we classify it as pleasurable, and yet we act as if it's something to be feared and controlled, except in very specific circumstances.
Mm.
And so I'm going to bring another element in, which is, when I speak of how in Tantra, the four core characteristics, and one of them is that in Tantra, there is a fundamental sense of honoring not only the divine as transcendent, but as immanent, honoring Shakti as this dynamic force that is the universe itself and everything in it. All the vibration of all of existence is Shakti. That conviction, that felt sense that is the nature of reality, also changes the way we relate to our emotions, our life force, our intuitions, everything. We can relate to it differently instead of something that has to be always controlled because we're identifying just with the mind and the one that can be in control. There is the possibility of embracing this energy in a way that it expresses itself as expansion. So then, more specifically, there's so much that can be said about this. So I'd like to share with you something that I've shared before, but it's very relevant to this, what we're talking about today. I had an experience at the Science and Non-Duality conference in a practice where we were doing trauma release exercises, right? Or tension release exercise, TRE. And in that process, I had this insight, this sort of revelation that where these maps that we use of energy, the Kundalini chakras, well, more specifically the nadis and Kundalini, and then the slightly different maps that come up in the Chinese system, the Taoist system, and then also what I learned from my Egyptian teacher. And then there's the ideas of sexual energy, the idea of like trauma. all of these things I experienced, you could say, all of it as a single embodied phenomenon instead of as abstractions, as like theoretical maps. It suddenly all made sense in that moment. And one aspect that was, you could say, a new insight in that moment was that even the fact that our body, when we are either advancing in the sense of, which can happen when we feel like we need to attack to preserve ourselves, or like the instinct for hunting or whatever, but there is let's say an instinctive drive to move forward, which can also be a gentle moving forward in life, like, oh, there's a fruit to pick, right, or there is a flower to smell. But the impulse to move forward has a certain physiological stance associated with it, right? Like if we're right-handed, perhaps we will tend to move forward with our right foot first, and our posture has a polarity to it. And similarly, moving back, it's not something we do straight, neither the moving forward or the moving back. There is a twist to it, right? And so the left and right of the body are, in some sense, prepared, conditioned. They've got an identity embedded in them as a result of this, that one is associated more with a readiness to move back and the other a readiness to move forward, right? And this is partly why in the mapping we think of one as expansive and the other as retractive, or you think of how masculine and feminine are referred to in the Taoist idea of yin and yang, right? Yin being more a contraction, and yang an expansion. So the idea of Ida and Pingala in this way, one is solar, the other is lunar, one is hot, the other is cold. It's the same principle. Like we've got these principles embedded in the organic intelligence. And so neutralizing these forces is partly, let's say, psychological. When the mind is very active, it's going to be pulling like a sense of I've got to retreat or I've got to move forward. But in the physiology, there is also you could say a somatized memory of these the words coming in Portuguese, carga, like a charge, an accumulation of energy which requires discharge in order to become neutralized. And so in that practice, in the TRE practice, we built up all this tension in the muscles in the legs, which then created the shaking of the muscles, which then created a discharge through the whole body. And as I relaxed into it, I found my body moving, undulating, as if I was in an orgasmic state. But all I was doing was just relaxing into a discharge that I was allowing to involve the whole body. And it was just natural for that to happen. And as I just deeply trusted the process, it became orgasmic, and it became identical to, let's say, a kind of a Kundalini type blissful experience. It was all those things at once, right? It was discharge of tension. You could call it of trauma, right? Trauma embedded in the body. It was pleasure. It was a spiritual experience, and it was everything, because it's a singular intelligence in some sense, but in different conditions we pick up on, this is sexual energy. Oh, this is a spiritual experience. Oh, this is tension and trauma. But it's all a singular intelligence, let's say. Hmm. And all of this relates back to the approach that I encourage and that we focus on in the whole first year, the whole first cycle of grace flow as a kind of a foundational basis for tantric practice, even though it's not a traditional practice. It's not something that I learned in the form that I share it from my teachers. I kind of observed that that's what makes sense in the as an organic process, as just a very uh, that's how I can put it, really, an organic process. Like, what do we need when we sit to begin to relax? We need to notice the breath, because that's one of the ways in which we can have a sense of the tension we're holding. Like, if we're not aware of the breath, we can be holding tension, but we'll be probably obsessed with what's happening in our mind, and our mind is just mirroring all that tension. So if we start to notice, oh, there's tension in the breath, so I can, if I sigh and I soften, then the mind will start to accompany that gentleness that's starting to happen in the body, the softening, the release. And so it's a very organic process, very natural process. But it's also, as well as a process of release, it's a process of deepening our listening and our sense of trustful relationship with the life force as we experience it in the body, but also a sense of trust and appreciation for you could say, for the how can I put it? It's not the world as a separate thing from us, but the sense of, also something that can happen through the practice, is the sense of inner and outer kind of dissolves, right? There is a sense of self that's distinct as you begin, probably. And then as you relax and as you feel the sense of connection with Earth and the connection with the field of Earth's intelligence, there is a sense of dissolving, of distinction, of self and otherness. And the sense of wholeness also comes from that. And the sense of being able to trust in life comes from experiencing yourself as not separate from it. So this deepening sense of trust is, it's not the most obvious and explicit purpose, but it's there being built upon this deepening of trust, this deepening of safety that comes with that sense of trust. And that changes how we can respond to all that intensity. If we're going to be working with energy in a more intensive way, it creates the conditions to be able to do that safely. So, I mean, I've said this before, but it just seems like a good opportunity to bring it all back into focus, because perhaps it's more meaningful in this moment.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for bringing up the questions, for the opportunity for exploration. Hmm. Hmm. And again, that perhaps mysterious statement from Lao Tzu, that doing nothing, everything gets done. When we take the pressure off, it doesn't lead to nothingness. It leads to the optimal conditions for energy to flow and for things to come into balance, and for processes that might have been impossible because of being delayed, like how the way physiologically we function with digestion, as an example. Like, if we're under extreme tension to do something, digestion will literally, it'll just stop until the emergency passes. The processes of cellular regeneration, they'll kind of stop while we're in emergency mode. And so in the doing nothing, all sorts of things start to be able to happen. Regeneration, digestion, not just the physical digestion of food, but also the sense of like digesting, integrating with what we have experienced in the past, what we've experienced up to now. We can find space to assimilate, let's say, what has built up and been impossible to give attention to. And so, something that I've also said before, but seems like a good time to emphasize it. A lot of what we call spiritual practice and the spiritual journey and the spiritual process, it's just coming back to a very natural, organic, harmonious flow of life. Because we've been taught, conditioned, formatted into unsustainable ways of functioning under pressure, we're trying to come back to naturalness. We tend to think of spirituality as this sort of thing above and beyond. And so the idea of the naturalness, just the fluidity of it, can seem mundane. But it's like the rediscovery of paradise. You know, the sense of reawakening to the sacredness that never became distant, only overlooked, because we entered into a mode of functioning in which we're really in a kind of an emergency mode. And that really does describe how humanity functions within, let's say, civilization. Perhaps not so much in many indigenous cultures, but civilization as a whole, generally speaking, is functioning in emergency mode, which is why we have these worldwide stories that explain how we got separated from the divine in some sense. One of the features of Tantra is that the myths are seen as internal processes. The gods are seen as internal forces. The heavens are mirrored in the organs and in the functioning of the life forces. And so, very naturally, the separation from the divine is also easily recognized as an internal process rather than let's say, a factual historical reality about the human being, an external problem in space and time. Hmm. Anything you'd like to share, Paula?
Uh, Not really. I'm digesting.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
I think you said that we completed the commentary, the Tantra Bhasya of the first two root sutras last time.
No, we
Oh,
still
you said
have to.
page 17.
Yeah. So we
Yeah.
have to read 18 and 19,
Yeah. Okay.
the
Okay.
comment.
So we can do that. Yeah, that's right. We did the commentary of the Moksha Dharma Vidya Sutra, but not the commentary of the Moksha Dharma
Yes,
Sutra.
exactly.
Yeah. Right. Mula Sutra, verse chapter 2, verse 7. See the divine in the recipient of your action. Whether you're giving, serving, or leading, this transforms work into worship. And in the commentary, the Tantra Bhashya, the sutra gives a beautiful instruction. The Tantric Bhashya completes the circuit. It is not enough to see the divine only in the recipient of your action. You must also see the divine in the actor, yourself, and in the action itself. When the trinity of actor, action, and recipient are all simultaneously recognized as a unified play of Shiva and Shakti, then work is not merely transformed into worship. It is revealed to have always been worship. The sense of separate I performing a service for a separate other dissolves into a seamless flow of divine activity. Mula Sutra, chapter 3, verse 2. As you govern your actions, so too must you govern your senses. Do not let them wander aimlessly in the fields of attraction and repulsion. Tantra Bhashya. The Dharmic path emphasizes control and discipline, yama. The Tantric path emphasizes transformation. To govern the senses or indriyas is not necessarily to withdraw them from the world in pratyahara, but to consecrate them. The senses are the gateways through which the world, which is the body of the divine, enters our consciousness. The aim then is not to shut these gates, but to purify them. It is to learn to taste without craving, to see without possessing, to hear without judgment. When the senses are thus purified, they no longer bind us. Instead, they become instruments of wonder, revealing the texture, taste, and vibration of Shakti in every moment. The world ceases to be a field of temptation and becomes a field for divine perception. This describes also what I was just saying, about the recovery of the sense of the sacred, the waking up to paradise.
Mm.
Mula Sutra, chapter 4, verse 1. The one of steady wisdom, Sthita Prajna, is not disturbed by the flow of desires, as the ocean is not disturbed by the rivers that flow into it. Commentary. This is a perfect description of the liberated state. And what is the nature of this ocean? It is the vast, silent, and motionless expanse of pure consciousness, Shiva. And what are the rivers? They are the dynamic flows of desire, emotion, and life force, Shakti. The Sthita Prajna is not one in whom the rivers have dried up. Such a person would be a desert, not an ocean. Rather, they are one who has realized their identity as the vast ocean itself. The rivers of life, desire, and energy may flow into them, but they're no longer identified with the small currents. They have the capacity to contain the totality of experience without being swept away by any part of it. The liberated one does not cease to feel. They cease to be fragmented by their feelings. They embody the divine marriage of stillness and movement, of Shiva and Shakti in every breath. The liberated one does not cease to feel, they cease to be fragmented by their feelings. Yeah.
What does it mean? They cease to be fragmented by their feelings.
So
But they cease, maybe have to, what is cease, like freed?
to cease is to stop. So it's
Never, yeah, they are not any longer
yeah,
fragmented into
yeah.
parts by their feelings. Okay. And what is the dharmic path compared to the tantric path? Is
Yeah.
that the transcendental?
Yes. Yes. Generally, you could put it that way. That the the word dharma can mean law. It can mean it's funny because it actually there is an interpretation of dharma that is totally tantric because
Yeah,
it can
that's why
either
I asked.
yeah, you can think of dharma as being like the rules, the things you must do and
Yeah.
must not do. So it's the effort you have to make to get things right. That's one way to interpret it, right? As the rules. But dharma can mean the meaning of it covers also the idea of natural principle, natural law, not something that is imposed, not an artificial structure you're trying to follow, not a formality you're trying to impose on yourself, but the natural way of things. And so following dharma is not just following rules, but entering into harmonious relationship with reality. Like the word the Tao. Tao also can mean the way, and you can interpret the way as a kind of predetermined right path, but within, again, Lao Tse's teachings, it states something along the lines of the Tao that can be um, spoken is not the real Tao. The Tao that can be walked is not the real Tao. So the moment we think of it as very artificially distinct and kind of solid, predetermined, we're not talking about the Tao anymore. So similarly, we can create rules that help yamas, niyamas, but dharma at a deeper level is just it's too rich and complex to narrow it down to what you do and what you don't do. These rules of what to do and what not to do are to help us not get into even worse fragmentation, even more sense of disconnection. So to create, reduce the tendency to accumulate our tensions and worries. You know, the yamas and niyamas can help. But ultimately, we're looking for not just always following the right rules, but to enter into communion with reality, with the divine, with life. And so that's what's being pointed to here as a distinction between the tantric way and the dharmic way. Um, yeah.
Hmm.
And then there's the last sutra that's in the text, followed by a commentary of it. Have you read these already?
No, the Kundalini Darshana Vidya Sutra, not yet.
Okay. So would you like to spend 5 minutes going through
Yeah.
the sutra? Okay. I think that's probably doesn't take any longer than that to read through it. So the Kundalini Darshana Vidya Sutra, aphorisms on the wisdom of and philosophy of seeing or comprehending Kundalini. Is tech and that the word seeing or comprehending here is the translation of the word darshana, which can mean darshana can mean seeing, right, a vision of something, but it's also used to mean the teaching, the view, the perspective that a tradition has, you know. So it's a very rich it's a word that's rich in layers of meaning. This text is structured into 4 padas, chapters or feet, a traditional format for sutra literature, reflecting a progression from philosophical foundation to the ultimate state of liberation. Chapter 1. This chapter establishes the philosophical view, darshana, of reality as seen through the lens of Kundalini. Prathama Pada, the Sutra of the Veiled Power, Darshana Pada. And because this is structured traditionally, it's given here the first verse in Sanskrit as well as the translation. Ataha Kundalini Darshanam. Now the vision of the coiled power is expounded. Vision of Kundalini. She is the primordial Shakti, infinite potential resting as finite form. The cosmos is her dream. In her slumber at the root of the individual, Muladhara, the one appears as the many. The self appears as the limited I. This perceived separation between the seer and the seen is the primary source of all bondage and suffering, dukkha. Remember when I speak of ego dynamics, also the idea that the source of all our restlessness, the source of our pain is that sense of separateness as a distinct self. This perceived separation between the seer and the seen is the primary source of all bondage and suffering. She is both the veil of illusion, Maya, and the key to its unraveling. She sleeps, and the world of form binds. She awakens, and the path to formlessness is revealed. The human spine is the axis of this divine play, the staff of Shiva, around which she, the serpent power, is coiled. To know her is to know the bridge between the manifest and the unmanifest, between humanity and divinity. This is the supreme knowledge, Vidya. Chapter 2. This chapter imparts the essential knowledge of Vidya, of the subtle body and the tools for practice. Dvitiya Padaha. These Sanskrit terms are just saying first chapter, second chapter, third chapter, fourth chapter.
Yeah.
The Sutra of the field and the means, Vidya Pada. The physical body is the sacrificial ground. Within it lies the subtle field, Sukshma Sharira, the true arena of practice. Three principal channels, nadis, govern this field. The lunar channel of mind, Ida, the solar channel of life force, Pingala, and the central channel of light, Shushumna. While Kundalini sleeps, life force, prana, flows through the outer two channels, maintaining duality. The Shushumna remains dormant. Along the axis of Sushumna lie the lotuses of consciousness, chakras, the wheels of energy that are gateways from the gross to the subtle. Purification of the body, channels, and mind is the prerequisite. A clear vessel is needed to hold the sacred fire. Mastery of the life force, pranayama, focused intention, sankalpa, potent sound, mantra, and unwavering meditation, dhyana, are the tools for awakening. The grace of the Guru, whether internal or external, illuminates the path. Chapter 3. This chapter describes the process and experience of the awakening and ascent, which is the core practice, abhyasa. Tritiya Pada, the Sutra of the Ascent, Abhyasa Pada. Aroused by the friction of practice and the fire of will, she stirs from her sleep with the force of 1,000 suns. Uncoiling, she enters the mouth of the Shushumna, the royal road long sealed. This is the piercing, Bhedana. As she ascends, she pierces each chakra, consuming the limited consciousness residing there. At each lotus, karmic seeds are burned, psychic knots, granthis, are untied, and the practitioner experiences transformations of consciousness, manifest as inner sounds, nada, lights, jyoti, and states of bliss. The lower energies are dissolved and transmuted into higher frequencies of consciousness. Fear becomes fearlessness. Desire becomes divine love. The journey is not to be forced. It is a surrender, an allowing of the Divine Mother to return to her source. Patience and steadfastness are the guardians of the path. Chapter 4. This chapter describes the ultimate state of liberation, kaivalya or moksha, and the fruit of the practice. Chaturtha Pada, the Sutra of Union, Kaivalya Pada. Piercing the final lotus at the crown, Sahasrara, the thousand-petaled seat of pure consciousness, Shakti merges into Shiva, the silent witness. The serpent merges with the eagle. In this union, the nectar of immortality, Amrita, flows, flooding the entire being. The knower, the knowing, and the known become indivisibly one. The individual self, jiva, which was but a reflection, dissolves into its source. The sense of I as separate from existence vanishes. This is the true seeing. This is the end of forgetting. The world is no longer a source of bondage, but is seen as the radiant play of one's own self. Established in pure being consciousness bliss, Satchit Ananda, the yogi is liberated while living, Jivan Mukta. It is Kundalini Darshanam. Iti Kundalini Darshanam. This is the vision of the coil power. This is the final truth. And then we can cover the commentary next time.
Mhm. You wrote this, yeah, with the help of AI, or?
Yeah, yeah. And it's a funny thing that happened when I did this, because um, the traditions passed on by living beings with their Shakti, there is a, let's say, a living force, right, that takes place in transmission, in the encapsulation of the teachings into verses. There is a process that is usually a very human one, right? And there was a process here where the idea kind of came into being partly through contemplating these names of texts. I came up with the names of the texts, and then you could say, seeded the idea of drawing from the body of wisdom that exists available online, that explains the teachings, all the sutras that have already been written and the teachings, and to use the structure to draw the essence of the teachings into this form that is traditionally used, partly because it's so succinct, it's so condensed, it's so maybe even memorable, right? You can remember certain verses. You can have a short commentary where you just focus on specific verses. And so it's to create a clear thread that can be followed, that helps to bring focus. I had mixed feelings about doing this because it felt like doing something artificial, right? Artificial intelligence doing this work of compiling and putting into this sacred form. But you could say I felt in some sense guided to do it. And when I started reading, I had to stop reading and just kind of go into a meditative, energetic process, which felt like the blessings were being received. You could say that this was being brought to life, that it was no longer just text pumped out by an artificial intelligence, but it was something that had been brought to life, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, it's very good. Good. I didn't know you can do something like that with AI.
Yeah, I think I think the idea might have crossed my mind, and I had kind of thought, no, 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 that's definitely not a good idea. I thought first, right? That there are processes that need to involve human consciousness, and you can't substitute it with artificial intelligence. But somehow, like I said, this came through, and then it felt like an anchoring of some kind of energetic anchoring took place to bring to breathe spirit into it, right?
Yeah. And but I'm also surprised like how much obviously is available in the internet to for the AI to be able to do this, no?
Countless original
Oh,
texts and commentaries,
wow.
just countless texts and commentaries, everything that exists, everything that's
Yeah.
available to us. Of course, there might be somewhere some text still not yet photographed and put online, not yet, but even if it's not yet translated, if it's just been photographed and put online in Sanskrit, I think that the AI can go there, get the original Sanskrit, and use that as a source.
Yeah. Very nice.
Yeah,
I hope humanity is able to use it in a wise way.
yeah, yeah.
Good of everything and everyone. Yeah.
We have that opportunity to do things that would have been very difficult to do before, to uncover things, figure things out. But we need to evolve in our maturity to use these tools to their best potential.
Yeah. Can I share this with students?
Sure.
This
Yeah.
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 Ex
I for the other text, the one that I shared before, the Satchakrabheda Kundalini's journey, I added like a thing at the beginning saying, you know, if you're reading this text and you're not part of the teacher training, it's strongly recommended that you seek a teacher to guide through Kundalini processes because they require assistance. Um, but you can share that one too. I'll share with you the most recent version. In fact, that what I've just said, I've only added to the Portuguese version, and I'm adding some quotes from the scriptures to the Satchakrabheda text to enrich it a bit, and I'll share that version with you. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Big hug to you, and wishing you a beautiful weekend.
Ciao, Peter.
Ciao, Paula.
Have a nice weekend too.
You too. Thank you.